Birth, a beginning, a new life into the world, ready to learn, grow, and mature. Ideas, too, are born out of imagination, born out of lifelong knowledge, born out of stimulus. Ideas start as a seed, and then grow and mature into something not even conceived of at birth, or they wilt and die. An artist starts with an idea, a concept which he shapes and alters and grows with. He adds to it and subtracts and finally arrives at a thing of beauty. Artistic concepts are obscure. They're mixed up with emotions and imagination, and the finished product rarely pleases everybody. For the musician, a concept starts as a melody, and as the musician develops it, the melody becomes more complex. It's woven into a story or is aimed at creating moods. Then the music, once just a melody, is published and can be played by other musicians who put their own emotional interpretation into it, and it continues to grow. A sculptor starts with a block of material. As he looks at it, images begin to appear. The block communicates to the sculptor, and the sculptor communicates back. An idea forms, and the sculptor begins to carve. As the object begins to take shape, the original idea alters as the sculptor's mood changes. The block begins to form a character of its own, refining the sculptor's original idea. As the object approaches completion, the sculptor is drawn into it and addicted to it, wanting to put on the finishing touches, then send it into the world to be admired.
The piece of work should take on life very quickly after you start working with it. To you it should. To somebody seeing it, of course, he would think it was spoiled. If you gave somebody a half-finished piece of work, I'm sure that that person would say, well, you can never make anything out of this. But I know that you can, because this is the secret of the whole thing, is to just keep on going.
Corny Martins makes bronze castings. He works in a small makeshift studio that's just to the side of his house. His sculptures start as a wire frame.
I think it's a beautiful way of doing a piece of sculpture, for the very simple reason that you don't have to carve this piece of sculpture out of some material that is very, very hard. It's a very pliable. Wax is a pliable thing. You can form it in your hands. I think I've mentioned this before, but you can even torture a little piece of wax and twist it into an odd shape if you like. You can put a fingerprint in the wax and put it into the mold, cast bronze, silver, gold, anything that melts. Pour it in there, and there you have it.
A musician interested in all kinds of music. He's best known for classical guitar, but his diversions include jazz and percussion. He enjoys the sounds around
us. I'm interested in kinds of music and all kinds of sound. The guitar is my main interest, but I'm also have a side affair with percussion and drums. The sound of drums tends to bring one back to one's roots of music, back to the origins of music in the first place, which was sounds in nature, hollow logs, twanging bows, and this sort of thing were all percussive sounds. And it helps keep me in contact with the very roots of my art. I learned a lot from percussionists because they have an open mind about sounds. They tend to find very innovative ways to make different tones. This drum is quite remarkable in that somebody discovered that attaching a stick to the head and rubbing it with wet fingers or cloth makes an interesting sound. Originally used as a monkey call, but it's used as a Latin percussive instrument now. All the sounds that can be made by hitting anything against anything or rubbing anything against anything. Percussionists somewhere around the world have decided that is usable in a musical sense. Metal bands, of course, have always used junk metal. These aren't exactly junk metal, they're cymbals. But they were junk in that they were garbaged by music stores, just laying in the back. They're going to throw them out. Individually, of course, they're not all that much, but when you take them all by themselves, or all together, rather, you get some interesting sounds. And then you get some very unexpected tones from cymbals that you wouldn't expect to hear a tone like this, for example. Out of a small, cheap little cymbal like that. So whatever I can find to make a sound with is usable to me in a musical sense. I enjoy playing trap drums, sets of drums, because it's trained coordination between my hands and my feet, which one might not suspect to help me in guitar playing, but somehow or another it has, just in a rhythmic sense. In fact, even the techniques of playing drums have increased my technique on guitar by making me aware of muscles in my body and arms and legs that I might not have been aware of otherwise.
The sounds of bronze casting are quiet and delicate for the most part. There's the sound of the hot plate melting the wax, the whir of the high-speed drills, the blowtorch purring in the background, and the sounds of carving the wax into the finished form. The next stage of Corney's bronze casting is to cover the wax form with clay. process Corny uses is 4,000 to 5,000 years old. He explains the history of bronze casting.
To begin with, it was used by primitive people using beeswax and clay and doing exactly the same process that I'm doing today. They would find some beeswax and make a little animal of some kind, cover it with clay and leave a hole in the clay for the beeswax to run out, put it into their fire, and the wax would run out, and leave a hole in the clay. And in most cases, they would use gold or, well, silver. There wasn't that much silver, I don't think, but gold anyway. And they would pour this little cavity full of gold. They'd smash the piece of clay, and you'd have a beautiful little animal in gold, exactly what they did in wax to begin with. I'm following the same procedure. We have a little bit more sophisticated ingredients for the things that we do. Instead of using clay, I use ground up fire brick, which has been fired once already. I use plaster of Paris to keep it together instead of clay again. Use a kiln with natural gas instead of a fireplace, and so on. But the procedure and the outcome, I would say that probably some of the work that they did at that time would be just as good as some of the things that we're doing right now today. I think it's a beautiful way of doing a piece of sculpture.
Is about to start practicing for a concert with the Lethbridge Symphony. The piece he'll be playing is the Concerto de Aranjuez by Joaquin Rodrigo. He arrives at his studio at the University of Lethbridge.
No, the first interest in guitar came from my mother, who played the guitar and sang for sing-along sessions at home. And I just had a natural curiosity and interest in the instrument, and when I was about 11 years old that she first showed me a few chords. And I took some lessons with a local teacher named Marv Qualley, who taught me a great deal about chords and rhythm guitar playing. From which I proceeded to do a lot of pop guitar playing, and eventually got into a rock and roll band that was fairly popular at the time. There came a point when I had to make a choice of whether I was going to go on the road and play with the rock band or stick around and make money teaching. And what influenced the choice was one gig that I had with another guitar player and drummer that we were playing just some standard jazz tunes, but the music was far more interesting than the music that I had been playing, and decided that I didn't want to go the route of the rock band and stayed around. So I started teaching pop guitar, and it was about the first year, I think, that I was teaching guitar that I ran across an old classical guitar book written by Aaron Shearer, whose books are pretty much the standard for beginning guitarists now. And I had never heard of classical guitar at this time. I had no idea what it was about. But the book looked intriguing, and I took an old guitar and changed the strings on it to classical guitar strings, and followed his instructions in the book. And it was just fascinating, the whole world of being able to play accompaniment and melodies on the guitar all at the same time. Fascinated me, and of course it was far more challenging than the work I had been doing just with a pick and single line melodies. And so I sort of stumbled on classical guitar. And obviously the classical guitar had been around for hundreds of years, and it was just my own ignorance that kept me from knowing anything about it.
The process Corny uses for his casting is made up of many steps. Many of these steps are to permit copies of the original work. A rubber mold is made around the wax form. Using this mold, more wax models can be made. The copies are then filled with plaster, and plaster is also packed around the form. They're then dipped into a bucket of liquid plaster and held in place until the plaster begins to set. When it is set, the bucket is put into a kiln where it's baked. During the baking process, the wax melts and runs out, and the plaster hardens. It's then ready for the bronze. The pouring of the bronze itself is a private affair, usually attended by just Corny and his wife, Barb. She's there both as a safety precaution in case of spillage, and partly for luck.
People in the thing that I do are somewhat superstitious. Some of the things we act as if they're superstitions, but maybe they aren't. One of the things that I have always done since the first time I poured, I heard somewheres down the line, I guess, or read somewheres, that because the world turns from the west to the east, if you pour towards the west, you had a certain momentum there in pouring the bronze into a piece, and that the world turned to meet the bronze as you poured it. Now, I know that scientifically nobody would believe this, but to tell you the honest truth, I've always poured towards the west. I don't know whether it does any good or not. These are the sort of things that I'm not sure about, and as I say, I'm superstitious enough to take them into account. Why not? I mean, it makes no difference. I can always set myself up to pour it towards any direction. I need all the help I can get, so I pour it towards the west.
The crucible full of molten bronze glows an inviting orange red, and the roar of the fire adds excitement to the air. The actual pouring is over in a moment, but the memory is lasting. The finished product is Puchican Hero, a champion horse from the turn of the century, cast in bronze to live forever.
It's important to have the chance at a rehearsal to actually try these loose ends with the orchestra, say, as opposed to just getting together with the conductor and talking about it and then going in and cold doing it. Also, I think it gives the orchestra a little more confidence in what they're doing. Most of the people in the orchestra are not going to be able to hear the guitar. So I think getting together with the orchestra at a rehearsal like that valuable.
The culmination of Dale's work is the performance at the Yates Theater.